A few hours ago, the Avengers Doomsday trailer hit, and the internet froze on one shot. Thor, beaten, out of ideas, holds out his hammer, and Steve Rogers pulls it clean out of the air. Captain America, worthy, calling Mjolnir like it was always his. Hold on to that moment. It reopens a fight we're coming back to. But rewind to the very first teaser Marvel dropped for this movie, the quiet one, and it feels like a happy ending. Steve Rogers rides a motorcycle up to a quiet farmhouse. He walks inside. He finds his old Captain America suit, folds it, packs it into a box, and closes the lid. Then he picks up a newborn baby and just looks at it. No words. The music swells. Text hits the screen. Steve Rogers will return in Avengers Doomsday. Roll credits on the perfect retirement. Except watch it again. Because Marvel just told you almost nothing. And that's not lazy editing. That's a magic trick. They put something warm in your hands so you wouldn't check what's missing. Look at his hand when he gets off the bike. There's a wedding ring. But you never see who he married. You never see a face. The baby? You're never told whose it is. And Steve looks young. Not the old man who sat on that bench at the end of Endgame and gave the shield away. So which Steve is this? And before you say it, it's a variant, obviously. Hold that thought. Because if it is, it breaks something Marvel spent years telling you was settled. That's the trick. The teaser hands you a wedding with no wife, a child with no mother, and a Captain America who shouldn't look like this. Every warm shot is a question, with the answer cut out. And the two answers aren't close. If this is the Steve who went back in time and grew old with Peggy, the math doesn't work. He'd be old. If it's a version from somewhere else, then the ending everyone cried over in 2019 doesn't mean what you think it means. Marvel had one job with this teaser: make you feel everything, tell you nothing. They nailed it. So how do you work out which Steve you're looking at? You don't stare at Steve. You look at who he's holding. Because that baby isn't set dressing. It's a name Marvel hasn't said out loud yet. And the name is the whole answer. Forget who Steve married for a second. The baby is the bigger clue. Because whoever that kid is tells you exactly which Steve came home. Think about it. A baby has a birth, a timeline, a mother. The moment Marvel gives you the child's name, they've told you which reality you're standing in, and they know it. That's why the teaser shows you the kid, but won't say the name. Because in the comics, Cap's children come from all over the map. There's James Rogers, the son of Steve and Black Widow, from a story set in the future. There's Sharon Rogers, the one child Steve and Peggy ever had together, from a video game. And there's Ian Rogers, a boy who grows up to become an anti-hero called Nomad. One's from a future timeline. One's from a world where Steve never crashed that plane in the 40s. One's from a dimension so far off the main path it barely touches anything you've seen. Different kid, different mother, different life. So the baby isn't a heart-tugging little moment. It's a location pin. Name the baby, and you've placed Steve on the map. Which timeline, which life, which version of everything. And here's where a leak makes it real. The scooper who leaked the teaser first says the child is a boy, named James. Sit with that. Steve's best friend, the man he went to war with the Avengers over, is Bucky. And Bucky's real first name is James. So a Steve and Peggy who named their firstborn son James just told you, without a single word, who Steve never stopped missing. Now the honest part. Because this is the whole point of this channel. This is a leak, not a trailer, not a poster, not a word from Marvel. Scoopers get things wrong, and this one might be too. Hold it loosely. And the leaks go one step further, that this kid isn't a background detail at all, but a big part of why the whole story happens. Grain of salt on top of a grain of salt. But the shape stays the same. The child Marvel won't name might be the most important person in that room. Because if it holds, that quiet farmhouse isn't a happy ending. It's a man naming his son after the friend he couldn't save. That's the argument about where Steve Rogers is going. But there's an older question that never actually got a clean answer. Where he came from in the first place. Not the farmhouse, the lab, what actually turned a sick kid from Brooklyn into Captain America, and whether the real ingredient came from somewhere Marvel doesn't want to talk about. Fast fact check. You've probably seen the theory that Cap's super serum was made from Black Panther's heart-shaped herb. It's a great story. It's wrong. And the movie told you why, years before Wakanda ever showed up on screen. In the first film, Erskine explains it plainly. The serum doesn't hand you powers. It turns the dial up on whoever you already are. That's the whole point of Steve. Skinny kid, good heart, dialed up to Captain America. No Wakandan plant required. The herb theory only exists because fans wanted Cap and T'Challa connected. Marvel never drew that line. So, busted. And it took 10 seconds. That one was easy. The movie gave a straight answer. Here's where it stops being easy. Because the next question doesn't have one answer. It has two. And they come from the people who actually made these films, who, it turns out, can't agree with each other. And it starts with the exact moment that just blew up the new trailer. Here's the moment everyone's replaying from the new trailer. Thor's beaten, out of ideas. He looks up and says, "We need a miracle." Then a voice behind him. "Hey, pal." Thor turns and holds out Mjolnir, and the hammer flies out of his hand to Steve Rogers. Captain America, standing in the light, worthy. The theater erupts, and it should. But that one shot quietly reopens a question the people who made these movies have never agreed on. Not whether Cap is worthy now. We've known that since Endgame. The question is when he became worthy. And on that, the director and the writer of these films are at war. Rewind to Age of Ultron. The party. The Avengers taking turns trying to lift the hammer, and it's a joke. Nobody moves it. Then Steve grabs the handle, and it budges. Just barely. Thor's smile drops for half a second. For years, fans have argued about what that twitch meant. Turns out the makers can't agree either. Ask the director of Endgame, and Cap was worthy the whole time. His take? In their heads, Steve could always lift it. He figured that out in that exact moment, and stopped himself. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to embarrass Thor in front of everyone. That's not weakness. That's Cap being Cap. Now ask the writer. Completely different answer. His take, Steve wasn't worthy yet, and there's a reason. He was sitting on a secret. He knew Bucky killed Tony's parents, and he was hiding it. That guilt is what held him back. Only once the secret came out, years later, could he lift it for real. See the problem? One says he was always worthy and chose not to. The other says he genuinely couldn't, because he was lying to a friend. Those can't both be true. And the one man who could settle it, the guy who actually directed that Age of Ultron scene, was once asked point blank why Cap wasn't worthy. His answer was 4 words. Did he fail, or did he stop? That's not an answer. That's a shrug in riddle form. So the moment that just made a theater cheer has 3 storytellers behind it, and 0 agreement on what it actually means. Quick pause. If you just realized the people who made these movies can't agree on them, that's this whole channel. What the creators actually said, on the record, and an honest flag when even they don't know. If that's your kind of rabbit hole, subscribe. Okay, back to it. That was a fight buried inside the story. This next one played out in the real world, in interviews, on camera, with a completely straight face. Here's a small, perfect story about how much you can trust a Marvel actor. Anthony Mackie, the guy who took over as Captain America, heard a rumor that Chris Evans was coming back for Doomsday. So he did the obvious thing. He asked him, straight up, "Are you coming back?" Evans looked his own successor in the eye and said, "Oh, you know, I'm happily retired." Mackie believed him. Why wouldn't he? Then his manager showed him the news. Evans was coming back. Mackie found out the same way the rest of us did, from a headline. And it wasn't just Mackie. Evans told the press flat out the reports were fake. His words, "That's not true. This happens every couple years. I've just stopped responding to it. Happily retired." And he kept the act going. As late as June 2026, barely a month before this trailer, he was still playing coy, telling reporters it was sad to not be back with the band, that he felt like he wasn't invited to the party. Weeks later, the party posted the invitation. The trailers showed Steve Rogers alive and well, and in the newest one, pulling Thor's hammer right out of the air. Every denial, right up to the end, was a lie. A friendly, smiling, look-you-in-the-eye lie. So when a Marvel actor swears they're not in the movie, that's not information. That's marketing. So don't trust what an actor says off camera. And while we're on things Marvel slipped right past you, there's a 2-word line in an earlier film that fans swear was a wink at one of the darkest things the comics ever did to Captain America. Captain America once said, "Hail Hydra," meant it, and became a villain. That happened, just not where you think. On the page, in 2016, Marvel dropped one of its most hated twists. Steve Rogers revealed as a secret Hydra sleeper agent. The story exploded into a full event the next year, and a lot of fans genuinely hated it. On screen, Marvel did something sneaky with it. In Endgame's time heist, Steve needs the scepter from a crowd of Hydra agents in an elevator. Instead of fighting, he whispers, "Hail Hydra," in one guy's ear, and strolls out with it. Fans caught it instantly. The movie was reaching straight into the comic everyone argued about and turning the hated line into a 2-second crowd pleaser. The real Cap, weaponizing the phrase that was used to betray him. Marvel never explained the joke. They never had to. One Hail Hydra made Steve Rogers a traitor. The other made a theater cheer. Same words, told told by two very different storytellers. That one was Marvel having fun with a comic. This next one is Marvel hiding something in plain sight, and once you see it, one of the saddest scenes in these movies gets a whole lot sadder. You've watched Steve Rogers say goodbye to Peggy Carter. What you probably didn't know is that, according to the men who wrote it, you were watching a husband bury his own wife, twice, and never realize it. Start with the setup. In Winter Soldier, we meet an old, dying Peggy. Over the years, the movies mentioned she got married and had 2 kids, but the husband's face? Never shown. Deliberately. And for a long time, nobody knew why. Then the writers explained it. Their answer? The husband you were never allowed to see was Steve. Their belief is that Steve went back in time, always went back, and lived that whole life as Peggy's husband. We have always thought that he was her husband, McFeely said. Not a branch, not another reality. The same timeline you'd been watching the whole time. Now let that resettle 2 scenes. That bedside goodbye in Winter Soldier, young Steve holding the hand of a dying woman? If the writers are right, he's sitting with his own future wife, and doesn't know it yet. And it gets worse. In Civil War, young Steve is a pallbearer at Peggy's funeral. He carries her coffin down the aisle. One of the writers said he likes to picture an old man sitting quietly in the back of that church, old Steve Rogers, watching his younger self carry old Steve's wife to the front. Sit with that. A man watching himself bury the love of his life, from a pew, unable to say a word. But, and here's the catch, this is only what the writers think. The directors don't agree. They've said Steve went off to a separate branched reality, meaning the old man who came back isn't quite the Steve this team knew. And McFeely admitted it himself. Not everyone agrees with us. I don't even know if Marvel agrees with us. So the saddest reading of these movies, the man at his own wife's funeral, is a reading the people who made them can't even agree is real. And if the rumors are right that Peggy herself turns up in Doomsday, this stops being a debate about old scenes and becomes a question the new movie has to answer out loud. And here's the thing about that argument over Peggy's husband. It's not a one-off. It's the tip of something bigger. The question this whole video has quietly been circling since the very first scene. Where did Steve Rogers actually go? Because the people who made these movies have been fighting about it for 7 years. And the trailer that just dropped might have finally forced the answer. Let me show you something you didn't notice. Twice tonight, you've seen the same card. Contested. Once for the hammer, once for Peggy. And you probably filed those away as 2 separate little mysteries. They're not. They're the same argument. One fight, 7 years long, between the people who made Captain America. And it comes down to a single question. When Steve went back in time to be with Peggy, where did he actually go? 2 camps. Neither budges. The directors say Steve created a whole new branched reality, a separate timeline, and the old man who handed Sam the shield had to physically jump between realities to do it. The writers say no. No branch. Just being there splits nothing. So there were quietly 2 Steve Rogers in the main timeline from the late 40s on, one of them frozen in ice. For 7 years, that was a fun thing for fans to argue about. Not anymore, because the trailer that dropped a few hours ago just told us what Doomsday is actually about. The multiverse tearing itself apart. Incursions. Whole universes on a collision course. And the theory everyone landed on within minutes, the one lighting up every comment section right now, is that Steve is why. That his choice to stay in the past is the crack that's breaking reality. Now, straight up, that is not confirmed. Marvel hasn't said it. It's the leading theory, not a fact. And half the internet is about to repeat it like gospel. But watch how perfectly it fits. Whether Steve made a branch or left 2 of himself in one timeline, either way his choice had consequences. And the movie is now built on them. The 7-year argument about what he broke isn't a debate anymore. It might be the plot. And it got heated enough that the fans held a trial. The biggest Marvel wiki staged a formal debate over whose word counts, and ruled for the directors. Their logic is the sharp part. The directors stated their version as fact. The writers kept calling theirs a theory, and when the makers disagree, the one who hedges loses. Here's the part that makes all of it delicious. Doomsday is being made by these exact people. The directors, the branch camp, one of the writers, the main timeline camp, plus the creator of Loki, the show that's entirely about branches and variants. The people who couldn't agree for 7 years are in one room, writing the answer. So go back to the very first thing you watched tonight. The farmhouse. The baby. That's not a happy ending anymore. It might be the first frame of the crime scene. And on December 18th, we finally learn who's been right for 7 years. That's 8. Every one of them real. Everyone pulled from what the people who made these movies actually said. And notice how many didn't get a clean answer. because that's the honest part nobody tells you. Half of Captain America isn't settled canon. It's an argument the creators are still having. So I want yours. The big one first. Where did Steve Rogers go? The writer's version, where he was here the whole time? Or the director's version, a branched reality we'll never see? Pick a side in the comments. I read them. Second, the hammer. Was Cap always worthy and just too humble to lift it? Or did he have to earn it by coming clean first? And third, call it now, before December. When Doomsday drops, whose baby is that and which Steve is holding it? Drop your answers below. And subscribe, because in a few months, one of these arguments finally gets an answer. And we'll be here the day it does.